Maria, over to you. You are now moderating the panel. Okay, so once again, thank you very much, and please stay with us for this patient-centric session. Well, I'm very happy to hear that this session is all about patient centricity, because even this conference was created with patient-centric approach in mind. We were always putting patients first. And today I want to encourage you to stay tuned with us for the panel tackling this issue. We will present Katarzyna Gajewska will show us very exciting practical solutions which shows us how digital transformation in case of diabetes may impact the process, which does not only translate into more effective therapy, but also transforms the role of the patient. The patient is no longer a passive participant of the process. The patient is enabled, becomes active. So I think it's a great contribution to a discussion which will be joined by patients' rights. Bartłomiej Jakub Gołąb. We will be also joined by Dorota Kiliańska, the head of Florencia Foundation, but she is also very committed to digital transformation in nursing. And transformation in nursing, nurses are very close to patients, so I think her view, her perspective will be invaluable. Łukasz Osowski will share the designer's perspective, because he is in fact designing digital solutions, so he will explain why he believes the user is so important. And last but not least, this session will be rounded off with Lila Stavropoulou, who is engaged in patient advocacy, and she's very much committed to digital transformation, which is beneficial for public healthcare, and she has a great insight and understands the role of communication in the process. So we are in for a very exciting session. And to get on, I give the floor to Katarzyna Gajewska with very exciting presentations, because I've seen it. I've seen a sneak peek. So, well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for being able to present my perspective as a patient and a professional. I will be talking about digital health and why it's so important for the patient's health, how we are able to alter it as patients. By the way, today's presentation has excellent timing. I'll be speaking Polish. My presentation is in English because I know that we have other English language speakers. I'll be using some English words because I've been living in Ireland for several years, but it's the World Diabetes Month. It's Diabetes Awareness Month. So I can go on about diabetes for hours. So please, show me time, because I can keep on talking and topic, and I know everyone should have a chance to speak up.
So I will present my perspective. I'm not sure whether you can see my slides, because they seem to have disappeared from my screen. No, we don't see it. Well, so just very briefly about me. It was the slide where I was introducing myself. I am a patient. I have been suffering from diabetes since 1987. I been through a lot because of diabetes, but I managed to also conceive and give birth to a child. I have been very lucky when it comes to doctors that were open to new solutions, and I've been living with diabetes for over 30 years. It does not really hinder my life too much. I use many devices, and I also work as a lecturer on public health at the Medical University in Dublin. I'm also a postdoctoral researcher, and I focus on diabetes. The presentation is back, so a very short agenda. I will speak about life with diabetes and why technology is so important, why we speak about modern technologies in treatment of diabetes, and how digital health can improve patient experience. I will also speak about how we can support patients in improving their care. When I speak about diabetes, I always think about numbers. Diabetes is all about numbers. The burden of diabetes, its prevalence is enormous. We have almost 4 million people suffering from diabetes in Poland. 1 in 11 adults have diabetes, over 400 million people worldwide. And of course, there is diabetes type 1, which requires insulin treatment. Diabetes type 1 is a situation where insulin is not generated by our pancreas. So we have suffered from hypoglycemia or hyperglycemia. And for the last 100 of years, we were able to provide insulin, and now patient diabetes is no longer fatal disease. So hypoglycemia is dangerous and hyperglycemia is dangerous. So we need to find a balance between the hypoglycemia and hyperglycemia. Only then we can actually lead a life that makes it possible for us to function well. There are 42 factors that affect blood glucose. People with diabetes have these special memes which show how diabetics calculated insulin dose. So I've eaten so much, but then I practice some sport. I might go through a stressful experience, and all of this influences the glucose level. However, technology helps us to improve these imperfect calculations. We do meet doctors once, twice a year as adults. When it comes to access to education in Poland, it's not very high. In Germany, more time is dedicated to education and visits at diabetologists, but diabetes is all about patients. Patients need to take decisions daily. They need to take 50 to 100 decisions with medical consequences. So going back to my life with diabetes, it shows very well how much changed over the years with the developments of technology and science. The very first fantastic device was glucometer. It changed the quality of my life. It makes it possible to measure glucose level. For my parents, it was actually amazing because they were able to monitor my condition, seeing whether the glucose level was low or high. Then I started to use intensive therapy with insulin and restrictive diet. I administered insulin with the meal, so every time I was to eat something, I had to administer glucose, 6 to 8 injections per day. Then we had a technological breakthrough, the insulin pump. It is a small device that contains insulin, and you click a number of buttons in order to administer insulin. It actually gives you flexibility and it is able to adapt the amount per ml, and all the data is registered in this small device. It can then be transferred to a computer and analyzed. So we are departing from taking notes in a self-monitoring diary, which seems to be a nightmare for many patients. So then for 16 years, there were no major changes. The glucometers and pumps were improving, and the record of data and transfer of data improved continually. But since 2016, I've been using the sensor-augmented insulin therapy device. The sensor monitors my glucose level, and then based on this, using algorithms, it informs me whether glycemia is improving or increasing or dropping. So this device differs from glucometer, because using a glucometer is like going to a dark room, turning the light on for a second, then turning the light off, leaving, and then coming back in 2 hours and doing the same thing. And this constant monitoring allows me to stay in a lit room all the time and to see what is happening in my body. So this is a major qualitative change. For a year, I've been using another solution, this Roche solution, a very good one. Why am I using this Dexcom system? Because I can have data on my smartwatch, my smartphone, and the data is also stored in a computing cloud. And as the data is in the cloud, my diabetes team is able to see in real time, and I can actually adapt this cloud and use it for automatic dosage of insulin. In the world, there are many different solutions in the world. None of them is unfortunately refunded in Poland, but there are some DIY system. People use Libura, the cheapest glycemia monitoring system. They use insulin pumps and they apply special algorithms. So I would just like to show you a video which shows the old style of treating diabetes. I'm not sure whether you can see the film. It shows, how diabetes was treated in the time. It was very outdated, and technology has changed so much for people suffering from diabetes. So patients' movements are very active. They are organized and we are not waiting motto. Patients want to have access to technologies. Technologies are acceptably good, but they are not enough. So patients have gathered, have grouped in order to keep improving those technologies. So Night Scout is a movement which explains, creates, programs different solutions, including apps that manage the data for diabetics in order to create new systems, new devices for insulin dosage. We need to monitor glycemia. We need to have an insulin pump and an algorithm in our smartphone. So we analyze the data of glucose levels, and then we have the insulin delivery. Scientists, of course, came up with this artificial pancreas, but we require systems, special devices. And we have this DIY system, which requires for patients to be very engaged and to use all these devices, all these systems. So all this movement is sharing amazing solutions amongst patients. I had the pleasure of taking part in a research project in DIY artificial pancreas technology. So this was a questionnaire amongst the users of this system. And one of the main reasons why patients decided to start using the system was the fact that they were dissatisfied with the devices and technological tools that we're using. People were saying, I'm using this insulin pump and there is no possibility to have data in the cloud, and I cannot monitor the results of my child when it is at school, and I really need it. So I want to administer insulin using my smartwatch, and no system that is widely available makes it possible for me. So there was this drive on the side of the partners and patients, and it changes a lot. Tidepool is a company which was actually established by patients, for patients, is currently applying to the US FDA in order for such a universal application to be able to connect all the devices. Tidepool works with all the stakeholders worldwide, with foundations, pharmaceutical companies that offer insulin pumps and glucose monitoring devices. This application would gather information from all the devices, and it would make it possible to administer insulin in an automatized way. It shows how strong patients are and how vocal they are in expressing their expectations. So when we speak about the digital revolution, COVID-19 showed us how important it is to have virtual clinics, to have technological advances. Type 1 diabetes makes it possible to depart from seeing doctors face to face. We could see doctors online and only meet them once a year. So this digital revolution is actually underway. There are many advantages to this solution. However, there are also some downsides. And I would like to refer to those from the point of view of my PhD thesis, which I recently completed in Ireland. In order for such virtual clinics to be effective, we need access to technology. Devices that monitor and administer insulin are not enough. Computers are not enough. There are some socio-economic aspects. How can we offer a virtual clinic if a patient has no access to the computer? And if a virtual clinic is all about a call from a doctor who says, how are you feeling? Well, I'm feeling well, and I cannot test certain or take certain measurements, and I cannot send them to a doctor. Virtual clinic makes sense if both myself and my doctor see the same information on the screen, and they can discuss what is happening and what treatment should be provided. In Poland, 70% of children use insulin pump therapy. People under 26 have very good care. Even glucose monitors are refunded in Poland. But once you turn 27, reimbursement disappears. So if you develop diabetes in your 20s, you cannot have an insulin pump unless you buy it yourself. You are not able to receive the glucose monitor unless you buy it yourself, and the costs are very, very high. Before I came to Ireland, I paid approximately 100 euros per month for the pump itself. In Poland, if I wanted to use the monitor, I would spend 800 to 900 zlotys per month just for the monitoring. In Ireland, there is reimbursement for all types of treatment, and this treatment is provided free of charge. Well, free of charge for the patient because the government is funding this, but I can use all the devices. The problem is, however, money is not everything. Even in Ireland, the use of technologies is not very popular. Probably only a small percentage of patients use the insulin pumps, and even fewer the constant monitoring of glucose level. This is the slide from my doctoral thesis, and you can see that if we look at the technology uptake, seeing how many people use these technologies. Using the insulin pump as an example, we can see that care that you receive is determined by the place where you actually live and by the fact of how many clinics are available. We can see Dublin, the capital of Ireland. There we have most users of insulin pumps, but that's only 10% of grown-ups and 40% of children. We have many clinics that offer access to such technology, such specialist care for insulin type 1. In the west of Ireland, there are no clinics that would offer access to insulin pump treatment, therapy, and constant glucose monitoring. Those born in the western part of Ireland have virtually no possibility. They have no access to technology. So we have this postcode lottery problem. So access to treatment depends very much on where you're born and where you live. We could draw a similar map for Poland. We would have some central points with Warsaw, Kraków, Gdańsk, Łódź, and the rest of Poland would probably be painted white.
And now determinants of access to treatment technologies and solutions. Well, let me focus on introduction of patient-centric solutions when we enable consultations for people who do not live locally. So we eliminate place of living, availability, and in such case, thanks to e-health, we can put those determinants aside and they will no longer be critical in access to treatment and technology, and this is vital. And my final slide, because I know there's a discussion that follows, without structures, without physical opportunities to introduce selected technologies or selected therapies supported by technologies, the key, and this has been confirmed by my research in Ireland, well, the key aspect is the approach of the doctor and the patient. What does it mean? That this is the key criterion. If I have physician who's interested in new technologies, who is up to date with latest developments, and he or she knows how they benefit the patient, he or she is going to offer it to the patient, and patient will get access. But if the physician takes no interest, if he or she has been trained 2 decades ago and continues to stick to his previous knowledge, takes no interest in new technologies, patients will be not using them unless they are super motivated and they browse online and change their doctor. To sum up, I think diabetes is a strong case of the importance of digital health. Digital health makes a difference. I've been waiting 32 years for diabetes to be cured, but I don't think I'm the only one who believes that it's not a cure anymore. It's about new devices which make your treatment much easier. So this is my final note. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to discussion. Thank you very much for this fantastic presentation, which shows and explains the nature of this transformation, and social determinants, have been highlighted strikingly. We can see that access and availability of new treatment methods can be limited by social factors or social inequalities, in fact, unequal access to digital technologies. And on the other hand, digital transformation implemented adequately helps overcome many inequalities in health. So I think this is the perfect time to ask the patient's ombudsman to share Polish experience in implementation of remote solutions, e-health solutions. I know that this process has been largely accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And as we know very well from press releases, the Ombudsman's office has been very committed to monitoring ongoing developments from the perspective of patients' rights. So please comment briefly. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you very much for being here. I can see the countdown. I can see the number of participants of this discussion, so I'll keep it really brief. As the Patients' Rights Ombudsman, we are monitoring ongoing developments. E-health has really gained momentum. We probably remember on Monday we've heard, because the official announcement was issued, that we'll have an electronic register of adverse medical events in P1 platform. But any other day, we are monitoring e-consultations. We have accelerated the process. I know that this is the main channel of interactions of patients with healthcare system. Well, on the one hand, e-consultations offers a galore of opportunities, but it has limitations too. And patients keep on telling us time and time again, because we monitor a situation that, efficient registration for e-consultations are out of question. It's not possible. Sometimes you can't get through to be registered, to make an appointment. Sometimes waiting times are horrendous. You have to wait days for e-consultation. I can also tell you that in the old days, in front of some outpatients clinics, there were queues formed 7 o'clock in the morning or even earlier to make an appointment for a given day. And nowadays, you can't get through. So this is a serious issue. There are also reservations and objections concerning the quality of e-consultations. There are doubts as to the efficiency of diagnosis made during e-consultations. I'm sorry, the voice is gone. Referrals for diagnostic tests. I think, those results will be palpable very soon, because preventive tests are not being conducted. So that means that cancer will be detected much later than before. And I think we are alarmed on a mass scale that the span of time between detection of cancer, which used to be 2 weeks, is going to be extended. So mortality rate recently has increased. Yes, it's because the infection rate spiked 3 weeks ago. So probably in spring we can expect, many cases of advanced cancer, which wasn't detected in time. But of course, e-consultations cannot replace and will not replace, one-on-one appointments. There's too much automation in referring patients to e-consultations. There are too many barriers. For example, making an appointment is challenging in itself, and those issues need to be resolved. Plus, regulations. Right now there are no separate regulations on patients' rights. In e-medicine, e-health, or e-consultations, rights are the same, but there are issues. I know it may sound absurd, but for instance, I've heard it many times before that physicians ask patients to send them photographs, of course not patient photographs, but lesions on the skin or throat, to evaluate, how severe is the condition. I understand that it's a way to conduct e-consultation because you don't physically see the patient, but, what are the safeguarding measures? How is the connection secure? How are those documents stored? Should we send and share such photographs or not? It's a great sphere. So as a rule, it's a very much needed tool. But on the other hand, there are many problems, many related problems, and the never-ending problem we've been talking about with Maria. So e-health solutions, how can they be used by the elderly, people with mental disorders, people who are not fully capable or lack skills or live in a digital void with no internet connection and they are not able to have any consultation? So I know your presentation from Ireland was very exciting. You've mentioned DIY or do-it-yourself solutions. But are those versatile solutions? Yes, if you are relatively young, if you are technology savvy, I agree. In such case, you can do it yourself. It's a great way forward, and telemedicine is the future, should be developed. But there is an army of people who cannot be left to fend on their own, who cannot be left behind because they have no access to technology or lack skills. So it's a matter of finding or picking solutions. Yes, I'm finishing. Picking solutions to promote them. I know that the pilot implementation and pilot solutions are being put in place in other countries. For example, kiosks will be set up in primary healthcare units. I know it sounds like science fiction, but imagine you have a person who's unable to benefit from new technologies, but is able to have an oncological or cardiological consultation. So the person visits a hub where new technologies are available. Perhaps this is how we can bridge the gap created by lack of access of new technologies. It's very important because the state, our system is based on a social responsibility. We need to take care of everyone, those who are able and those who are unable to benefit from e-health. So, in practical, legal dimension, we should enable everyone to benefit from e-health solutions and no one should be left behind. Well, again, nicely put, and I think, it fits, it's aligned to the next question I want to ask Dorota Kiliańska. Well, the efficacy of this solution is also determined by our ability to have the patients engaged, and patient advocacy groups who are engaged in co-creating different solutions. So digital nurses, their initiative is also close to patients, is focused on the patient, because you connect the strictly medical universe with patient centricity. So please comment. Thank you for inviting me. From the perspective of the nurse, I would like to comment on it. I'm also a person who's introducing students to new technologies, and I have an impression that new technologies designed for patients and medical professionals alike are also designed for people 50 years old, over 50 years of age or 60 years of age. We have very digital competencies. Recently, I think last year, OECD claimed that only 20% of Poles aged 65 and over used the internet. Out of 24 information was looking for health information. So there are many digitally excluded people. Jakub Gołąb mentioned it. There are people who will be completely unable to benefit from this technology because they don't have the right competencies. I think there is enormous role to play by nurses kiosks are a great idea, but you need to know how to use them. Well, in countries with very advanced digitization, it's the nurse who's the first point of contact. She or he instructs patients how to get in touch with the physician. So it's fair to say that most e-consultation solutions are geared for physicians, while communication can be dealt with nurses. Communication is essential, and I hope that in the nearest future we will become patient advocates, because today we can educate patients how to use gamidat.gov.pl, but I can say from my experience, I have a 90-year-old husband, and I was instructing him over the phone how to use this website. And, you know, as a result, if he puts his finger on the button, you know, he can open the website, because a password would probably prevent him from opening the site. So we need to keep in mind that while developing new technologies, there are people who are 65 years old and over, and with COVID in place, we need to have patient results in real time. We need to know what is happening to them in real time. Patients cannot wait for information. Data should be cleared, should be available here and now. They should be safe, and also very important in e-health strategy is healthcare data government, which is meant to help physicians in decision-making, driven by real-time data. We also need to keep in mind that patients need to be engaged, regardless of their age, in co-designing solutions. For example, waiting time. There was a project implemented several years ago, and it focused on respondents who are internet users, who have some digital competencies. So we have a large undiagnosed group of patients who lack competencies, and there are no people able to help them. Perhaps a help desk operated by a person who would visit patients at home and help to use different devices, you know, to help the patient find the bearings in the digital world. Perhaps that would help. Or e-consultations. You can't call a patient and ask him or her, "How are you today?" You know, a patient who is conscious and aware and well-informed is going to provide you with some relevant information, but if he or she is not, you are not going to get any worthwhile information. So e-consultations must be organized differently, more effectively. For example, private phones cannot be used for sending and transferring health data. In the UK, it's forbidden to use your personal devices to receive or provide e-consultations. And last but not least, I know from my experience, I tried to have an e-consultation with a dermatologist, because it's very difficult to get the dermatologist to see the patient. And what I got back was a very detailed description of the skin lesion, but the dermatologist noted finally that I need to see it to make the final diagnosis, and sometimes it's impossible. But we need to encourage healthcare professionals to not to create barriers if this is what the patient expects, because the patient has the right to receive high-quality medical service. Okay, so I've touched on very different issues, but I think I've listed key elements that we need to address, especially healthcare data government. It must be covered by e-health data that helps you benefit from health services anytime and anywhere.
Znowu uzupełnienie i wprost przechodzimy do...
Well, thank you very much. This complements the information very well, and we are moving to the user experience. Let me ask Łukasz Osowski to say a few words of how the development of such solution is like. Well, thank you very much, Katarzyna. This was a great presentation, a great story of someone who needs such devices, solutions, and is actively seeking for improvements for herself and for the others. So this is a story that we have also heard about non-medical products and markets. For example, internet shops, online shops were created because people needed it, and many other solutions. And now we are entering the world of medicine, and I'm very much impressed by your example, because this shows us that this is how things will develop. This is how things go. We will witness a revolution in medical services and devices. They will be centered on patients' needs. Patients will be very vocal on what they need, what they expect. They will be trying to create such solutions themselves, and then companies, producers will join in order to design such solutions and devices. Because if there is something that user needs, if there is something that the patient needs, and if passionate people are able to come up with solution, it is a shame for the market that it is actually not being done for them. So I had an opportunity of taking part in the voice synthesizer, which is used by 200 people in the world. And what was the basis? 30 or 20 years ago, this sound was terrible. Nobody wanted to use it. But we managed, while focusing on the users, on the recipients, to improve the quality, and actually everyone can use it. We are now using the voice assistants, the artificial intelligence, the voice synthesized, and we have no problem with that when we're driving, when we are seeking for information. So we want to create solutions that will be chosen by the users. And solutions will be chosen by the users if they resolve a problem in a friendly manner, if they make the problem disappear, or if they make the problem hardly noticeable. All technological companies employ many user experience designers. They work with patients, they work with users, trying to understand what could make the service better, what could make the device better, what could make sure that the problem experienced by the user is resolved. So in their leadership principles, all these companies have customer focus, customer experience. And the same thing is already happening in the healthcare sector. And going back to the introduction to the panel, if I have a few more minutes, we are living through a major breakthrough because of the COVID-19. All my children are now going through online or e-learning. They are learning from home, and teachers and parents had to learn very quickly how to use the electronic systems, how to use the remote systems. So this knowledge is becoming more and more popular and more accessible. So when designing solutions for our patients, we need to follow this trend. We can even be in the avant-garde of this trend, trying to show the patients solutions that fulfill their expectations. If we're not able to do it, patients will refuse to use our products and our services. That's it. Well, yes, this is the key thing. Patients need to be the center for the transformation. And I would now ask Madam Lila Stavropoulou, who has been listening to our discussion, what should be done? How do you see the role of patients in the digital transformation? Because we want to improve public health. That's an overall objective.
I'm continuing in English because unfortunately my Polish is really, really, really bad. So we're talking about digital transformation, and digital transformation requires engagement and requires change, as we heard before. And I was really happy to hear you yesterday telling that change will come into trust, because people, after trusting, this is how they're going to change. The change is a very intimate thing. And we're talking about communication, and communication being one of the most human tools that we have in order to express ourselves and also receive information, and also has a symbolic way. So we connect, if you want, health, which is also us as humans, and communication to create what we normally say now is health communication, which is actually using communication tools to share information about behaviors and all around health information issues. This communication is by definition and very interventionist. So you intervene into someone by giving them information about how to improve their lives or how they will find more information. And eventually what you want to achieve is this change, this behavior change, and to trust these new solutions that everybody's talking about right now. Unfortunately, with COVID, people were forced into this change. And we've seen, because of this was very sudden, we don't have always the means to inform people. And that's why all this discussion about fake news and false communication, and people, because of this fear and those emotions, went online to find whatever information they can in order to, if you want, feel better about this pandemic and all these problems that they caused, also in physical health, but also in mental health, as going to discuss afterwards. So to me, as a communication professional, it's really stunning to see discussing about digital health solutions, digital transformation, and how we're going to engage the patients. And we are also humans, and we're also patients. So every time we design a solution, we just can imagine ourselves in this universe and say, if I want to be engaged, if really I want to use something, it means that I have to be aware of this. So communication, information should be pragmatic, should respect actually my literacy, should respect the kind of understanding I have, and as we just discussed about people over 65 not being able to have a connection to the internet, or understanding what the internet is, or being afraid of the internet because of this misunderstanding they have. So the communication, what should do is go into all means. So we talk about digital transformation, but we don't have to talk about digital communication, because we segmentize our audience, and we see that there are people who actually have access to digital, and they will go online to find information, but other people who have no access to digital. So as communication professionals, when we design this, we have to think of these people and use all the means that we have. And we know now, for example, it can be traditional media. I'm talking like more communication professional. It can be newspapers. It can be the nurses. It can be the doctor. Any kind of channel, if you want, they have, in order to reach them and be able to communicate what is actually this app that we're proposing to them. Because most of the time, it's also fear of the unknown. We're talking about generations that they were used to do things in a different way. And we just abruptly now, with COVID, we demand of them to change this. And of course, they're afraid because they have no understanding. And that comes also to the cultural barriers that may have, and the language barriers that may have. I mean, many people believe that, okay, everybody speaks English, everybody can read. It's not the case. There are people who cannot even read, either because they never learned to, or because they cannot see and they have other issues. So we have to design communication messages and channels in order to reach everyone, not to leave anyone behind, as very well said before, in order to be able to disseminate the information that we have, to use all this. And of course, never forget that we're talking about health, so we have to be honest. It's not about communicating any other commercial product. Of course, I understand that we're talking about commercial nature of some services, but this is about health and healthcare and dealing with pain. So we have to be honest in this communication, and as simple as possible. Not everybody understands the language. Not everybody understands the lingo that we're using, like digital transformation, digital health application. There are many people who will say, what is these things? So it goes down into being as simple as possible, as honest as possible, because this is how people will trust us. I say us as the people who disseminate the information, or as a doctor or as a nurse. You have to be, of course, if you work as a doctor, but it is really important to change the way we communicate, especially keeping into mind that the benefit that we can have. And we've seen that when communication messages are designed in that certain way, people benefit from this, and people become engaged because we're talking about their health, and it's one of the most powerful things that can get us engaged. So if we have this kind of guidelines and values, which are, for me, are very important, I think we can mind the gap, and this is why I have this bridge over me, mind the gap between the people who actually need the service and the people who actually design the services. For me, communication is a very powerful tool. Just have to know to twin it correctly just for healthcare. Thank you.
Bardzo dziękuję, to była doskonała puenta.
Okay, thank you very much. It was an excellent recap. Communication that demonstrates in a very honest way terms, conditions, and roadblocks is essential for engagement. So I think this is the excellent summary of our panel. The patient must be put first. He or she must be able to co-create and design solutions, and we need to shift our paradigm to engage patients and citizens on a much broader scale and commit them to co-creating our healthcare system. So thank you very much. And it's the end of our panel because we are 4 minutes late, but I think it was worth it. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much to everyone, dear Maria, dear panelists. Thank you very much for this very exciting session, for fantastic speeches. Piotr, I think your question is answered. What is patient centricity? What is the role of patient experience in creating the new model of healthcare? Well, cunningly, you've avoided answering this question. You let others speak, but it's true that it's a very challenging word. Not very common. Patient centricity, I have to learn how to pronounce it. I think it will be rising in prominence, and such people like myself, who have no direct experiences with e-health, will know in the future what it stands for. Well, yes, the world is slowly putting the word patient centricity aside, and we are adopting a much wider term. It's not the patient, but man, who doesn't have to be the patient, who is in the center. Yesterday, during our discussion, our colleagues from Israel have used the term human-centric care. So care focused on the human. And care means not only medical or health services, but a much wider ecosystem. We are going to discuss it tomorrow. E-health ecosystem and building a new health order, a new health universe where the man or the patient is put first. And what's the role of technology? Because in a minute we are going to talk about it a bit. Well, technology is helpful. Today there are solutions in place, and we may use them to facilitate practical application of different solutions. It's just a facilitation. It's just a tool. It's an auxiliary solution. I deeply believe that we will remain humans, but technology will be helping us to be human and to pursue our dreams, our goals more effectively.